Well, hi everybody, this is Dr. Schroeder with this week's video introduction to week number 3 of our course in evidence-based practice. And of course, your task for week number 2 was primarily to go through and to take that PICO question or that PICO statement you developed in week number 1, refine it using the feedback that you've been given in class by your classmates and by myself, and then to develop a search strategy identifying specific keywords and alternative keywords that you use to find an appropriate number of articles, say somewhere between 25 and 50 or maybe up to 100 articles that you can then select. You're going to select 5 of those articles to use as a basis for your evidence-based practice project. And in reviewing, the one thing that I noticed is that several of you were using keywords that were either a bit redundant, and in other words, they were very similar when you used them on the grid. The terms were very similar and it really didn't vary very much. Or you didn't select all the terms that were really required. It's important. One of the hardest things about finding research, the hardest parts of this whole process, is really finding good research to use as a basis for an evidence-based practice project. Because unlike Google and unlike Yahoo, the professional databases, Cochrane and ProQuest and EBSCO and the rest, they don't use an artificial intelligence methodology like Google and Yahoo does. There's a very important reason for that. That reason is because as researchers, we need to have complete control over the review process. And if we have a computer program or algorithm that is trying to second guess what we're trying to find, it actually hampers our best efforts. We think that we're trying to get something that is scientifically based, and instead we get something that is the computer guesses completely wrong as to what we're really looking at. So it does means that there's a little bit more labor involved and a little bit more thinking and a little bit more deliberateness in the search process. So I did notice that many of you came up with searches that were a little bit scant, maybe only 5 or 10 articles, and it's really not enough to use as a real basis. So feel free from this point on to go through and find more evidence, especially if you're having difficulty finding evidence that really supports your intervention that you think is great. Then you really need to start looking at this research that you have found and identify the keywords that those researchers have used when they've posted those articles. That's where you get keywords, is from the new articles that you find. Include those keyword phrases, and that will usually help to expand your research results a little bit. And of course, what happens is now is in week number 3, a couple tasks involved. The first is that you're going to take all this information that you've done till now in class, the development of your PICO, the description of your problem and your population, your search strategy, and you're going to distill it down into a evidence-based practice paper. And the first part of this project that you're going to be doing in class is due this week. Please review the criteria and the template, and also the grading rubric. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to write an introduction. It is an APA paper, so it needs to be written in APA style and format. You will be graded on APA. You're going to have a paper introduction, give a background for the problem, identify your PICO question, and again at this point it really needs to be pretty clear and pretty concise, because if it isn't, and I know that it may seem like I've almost been nitpicky sometimes on making sure that those PICOs are worded just right. It's not because I'm trying to be hard or just nitpicky for the sake of being nitpicky. It's because at this point, if it's not clear, then it's not going to be clear in the rest of your paper. And that's going to be a problem when you go to try to describe what this intervention is. The intervention isn't clear and concise enough, or if it doesn't have a intervention that really, or excuse me, a comparison intervention that doesn't match, if the outcomes don't seem clear, and if they're too vague, likewise this whole project is going to sound very vague and it's not going to score very well. So that's why that PICO statement is in many ways the most important part, because it really is the basis of the foundation for your whole paper. You're going to write up your search strategy and discuss your search strategy using the guidelines in the assignment. Develop a evidence matrix, and there's an example of the evidence matrix posted in the syllabus, as well as a blank template. And then you're going to include your evidence appraisal tools. Those appraisal tools are also all included in the syllabus. There needs to be one of those completed for each of the pieces of evidence that you're going to use, that you're going to use as a basis uh, for your evidence-based practice project. And that will wrap up your evidence-based practice part 1. Later on in class, we'll be doing part 2, where you're actually going to talk about the implementation and how you're going to implement this particular project. Let me know if you have any questions about that paper or the assignment this week. I'll be more than happy to address them. Also in this week, we're going to switch focus a little bit in the discussion questions. In discussion, let me go here, make sure that I'm referring to the correct discussion question. We're going to be talking about different types of evidence. And up until now, we've talked just very basically about the importance of grabbing and getting evidence. Now we're going to talk about the different types of evidence. And this week we're going to talk about the differences between a meta-analysis and an integrative literature review. These are two different levels of evidence. We'll be talking about levels of evidence as we move forward. And you're going to be asked to review a couple of different articles that are reflective of these different types of analyses and give your feedback and how you feel that the authors met or didn't meet the criteria. And we'll be discussing in class this week how they're important. So that's fairly straightforward. But the big thing this week, of course, is your evidence-based practice project, your discussion question. The initial responses are due by Wednesday, with your follow-up responses due by Saturday, as always. And please leaving your feedback on subsequent days, and review the grading rubric for any specific questions about the grading. Also, on your radar screen should be in week number 4. Realize that you have a statistics homework, a take-home test, essentially. I mean, it's a test where the test questions are posted on in week 4, and it's an open book test, essentially. You go and you can find those test questions and then find the answers to them. I sometimes get the question as to what statistics books do you use or should you use, and that just all depends on where you took your statistics class. There's a variety of them. Any basic statistics class that you used in a nursing research course or for another school will work fine. Much of the information can also be found on good sites on the internet. If you have any trouble finding information, please feel free to go ahead and let me know. I am overall pleased with the discussion. The class is going really well. I think that we're getting a lot of learning done. Many of you have come up with some really interesting ideas for evidence-based practice. And even though I know I harp sometimes on making sure that you have your questions worded concisely and clearly, the bottom line is that everybody in class has really chosen some pretty interesting interventions. And so I'm anxious to talk about them, to see how they move forward and to see how you continue to develop those. So again, let me know if you have any questions. Look for your grading for this week to be done, and this will be the librarian interview and the discussion. They'll be done by the end of the week, so you'll be looking for those grades. I look forward to seeing you in class, and we'll see you in the discussion forums.